The future of publishing. It's a big story and a big question. Before we can look at the future, let's just think about the present for a second. I think there are three major issues going on in publishing right now. First off, Amazon is finally squaring up for a battle to the death with one of the big six publishers. They've been planning it for a long time. It's finally happening. Interestingly, courage is being rewarded. So I don't know if you've been following the publishing industry, but Amazon and Hachette have gone to the wire, really. Amazon wants Hachette to subsidize Amazon's downward drive on price. Hachette has said no. Unlike the other publishers, I should declare I'm a novelist. Hachette publishes me. I'm glad they said no for my own future. What happened, a little act of courage, is that although their volume went down, their profits have gone up slightly, which I think is interesting. The other, of course, huge driver in publishing is the switch to digital reading. Who here reads on a device? I'm assuming everyone, basically, in the room, right? I do too. I travel. They're super easy. They're portable. You know, in 2008, about $64 million was spent on ebooks. 2 years ago, it was $3 billion. That curve's just going to do this. One other word I want you guys to remember while I talk is curation. This is something that's not really done outside of the world of independent bookstores and hasn't yet made it into any kind of digital marketplace. It's something we think is important. So if you look at the situation facing the big publishing houses, they are terrific nurturers of talent. I published my first book when I was 21. They've held my hand, watched me develop, helped me pay my bills. They're extremely good at that. What they haven't done is owned their route to market or created their own device. Amazon did both those things. And that's why Amazon now has a gun to their head. I think that this is a moment where nifty little game changers of the kind championed by Ariadne can make a huge impact. And there's one key way in which Amazon so far hasn't competed, and in some ways can't, and that is quality. Ebooks are super convenient. You can take them anywhere. You can buy them anywhere. Everything else about them is awful. They look exactly the same. I don't know if you guys find this. I certainly do, and the research backs it up, that when you've read more than 10 or 15 ebooks, they all start to become less distinct in your own imagination, your own memory. I can see people nodding. It's because they all look exactly the same. And what they don't do is do anything that utilizes the kind of amazingness of the touchscreen device, which we all have. They're simple, flat, digital photocopies. And while I use them, as I was saying earlier, a little part of me dies because it's actually a terrible way to read. So Amazon is also facing a significant backlash from major authors who've said enough is enough. You're driving the price of what we're doing down. You're making it impossible for writers to make a living. Of course, also, Amazon's main business is not really books. It's not their profit center. And that's been led by people like Amanda Foreman, who wrote the book Georgina, Duchess of Devonshire, Georgina, which became the film The Duchess, starring Keira Knightley. She was a Booker Prize judge last year, and she's been kind enough to say that Orson is the single most exciting venture in publishing today. In focusing on quality, it is also very important, I think, to build a place where people can shop for quality. It's this question of curation. On Amazon, you can find any title, but what are the best titles? So, as Julie said, those who control the economics of an industry can win. I think that there's a real opportunity in publishing for people who are making story experiences that take full potential, that plumb the potential of touchscreen devices, to actually build a world in which everyone benefits. The right technology will allow publishers like Orson to start to build bridges between rights holders, text, sound, image, video. Maybe I should show you a couple of our looms. It's somehow very dark. It's not dark on the screen. On the screen, you can see the kind of vibrancy of the color. Oh, right, you can. Great. So I write by hand, but I write a lot about music, real places. I'm going to give you a little insight into our first collection and what looms are. First of all, it matters to us very much that looms look like themselves and nothing else. Another thing we hate is intrusive technology that says, touch this, push this, do this. If you want to read, you can read. But as you'll see when we show you a couple of looms, you'll remember what each one looked like. It will be distinct. If you're tired of reading, you just tap the screen and it starts to read itself to you.
Role model. As the weeks and months went by, he became a real friend to me and my parents. He took pride in my development as a musician. He laughed at my mother's jokes. But
this is a brilliant guy called Tom Sankton, who's the former bureau chief of Time magazine. He's written a memoir of learning to play jazz in New Orleans. This is a classic thing that an ebook can't do. And in fact, the paper book can't do it either. You know, when someone's talking about learning to play the clarinet from George Lewis, what you really want to do is to be able to hear George Lewis. So while you're reading about the experience, you hear it. It's not intrusive. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to. If you want to learn more about what's going on, you can see, you know, Papa Celestine's funeral. And look into the kind of moving world of the story. I'm going to show you next the loom of, this is our first ever loom. It's a loom of a novel that I wrote called History of a Pleasure Seeker. Pleasure Seeker set in 1907 in Amsterdam. This paper is all 19th century paper. All the illustrations are by hand. If you want to just read it, you can read it. In this case, prizes for guessing who this is.
And crossed onto the Herengracht Canal. On both sides of the water, houses built for the magnates of the 17th century surveyed the world with the serenity that comes from surviving the upheavals of 300 years unscathed.
Quick guess? Famous British actor. He's Dan Stevens, who played Cousin Matthew in Downton Abbey. If you want to just imagine, you can imagine. If you want to look into the world of the story, you can do that too. And all these images are explorable by your finger. I'm touching it. So essentially what we're letting you do is decide which senses to stimulate. And we're not replacing the imaginative experience. We're allowing you to decide to hear a piece of music or look into a room. It ends up being a great production. You know, we shot in color as well as black and white. You don't see the characters in the scenes, but you might see a room they're in or a dress they're wearing. There's a moment in Pleasure Seeker where the central character, who's 24, with a sharp grasp of human nature, is trying to get a job as tutor to a very troubled 10-year-old boy, and he has to show that he can play the piano. So he's auditioning for the boy's mother, and his intuition tells him that she hasn't had sex for a long time. So he decides to play a Chopin nocturne in E-flat major because his mother told him that E-flat major is the only key for love. When the loom is reading itself to you, you hear the music in the text.
Nina Barol's edition marked this piece espressivo dolce, to be played sweetly and expressively. And Pete began to play it softly from memory at a slow andante.
If you're just reading it and want to read it yourself, you hear the whole piece of music. And what this lets us do is go way beyond the world of books. We're working with best-selling authors, wonderful authors, who have millions of people who love their books. But millions of people also love Dan Stevens. Millions of people love Chopin, or you too. We're doing a deal now with Universal, has one of the biggest music catalogs on Earth, one of the best. Imagine if you could read a Nick Hornby novel, every time the music's referenced, you could just hear it. That's a totally different experience, I think. And the experience of reading something while you listen to it, to me, is really powerful. Everything you can do is all in the drop-down menu. Our interface, which the toughest critic in book tech, Melissa Perrinson of PC World, called the single best digital book interface ever, is inspired by an illuminated manuscript. I was talking earlier with someone who's describing a book full of things she wanted to learn more about. At the moment, in an ebook or a real book, a paper book, you've got to go to Wikipedia, you find a ton of stuff, you also see that, you know, you've got 20 emails in the last hour while you were reading. In a loom, it's all there. So an essay written either by the novelist or by an academic that takes you into the Belle Epoque or the banking panic of 1907. You can see galleries of images that are in the text. So we're able to include many, many more amazing images than books can. You can make and send notes, and of course you can share it. And later today, if you're in the mood to chat to our fantastic CTO, who rejoices in the name Johnny Walker, who's sitting over there. Johnny, put up your hand. Who has immense experience building brands through social media and has great ideas about how to take this forward. I feel that publishing needs a new digital standard. The current standard is EPUB. All it can do is basically flat PDF photocopies. A necessary step, and we've all read ebooks, terrific. But we now live in the 21st century. The devices are getting ever more amazing. There's space for a company that has real artistic integrity and soul, and that is represented at Orson by my wonderful co-founder, Benjamin Morse. I think the reason that our loons have done well is because of his eye. And you need the coding expertise that big publishing houses tend not to have. So our aim is for Loom ultimately to become the new open standard of the publishing industry. We want to curate the store that sells looms. And I'm going to end with a 30-second little clip from an early reader. We got Joanna Lumley into a studio and a number of former gang members, the ones who could read. So when you're listening to the audio, you hear, we call her J-Lou. She's Orson's little secret weapon.
At the height of the riots in the summer of 2011,
oh, you can't see
I
any
got
of
a
this.
phone call from Mash, an 18-year-old member of a Brixton gang who I had befriended 3 years before. I was on my way to court for the sentencing of the gang leader, a young man known as Tuggy Tug, who was then 19. 2 other gang members were already in prison. But Mash...
Were you able to fix it?
I'm getting there.
When you read that book, you want to know tons more about the situation facing these kids, as when you read mine. So for writers, you don't want to clog the narrative with all sorts of extra info. What you want to do is be able to read it. So here, in Harriet's case, you know, once you've read it, once you care about these kids, you can read about the literacy problems facing them. And now, because I don't want to overrun, I know you guys are desperate for lunch, as am I, we're going to hope that the video is finally working. And if it's not, which it isn't, again, not my fault, just listen for 30 seconds. You all know what she looks like. But if you saw her, it's the expressions on her face. Anyway, this is the point of reading. It's about your imagination, right? Imagine.
Looms are new to me. It's absolutely thrilling. The idea of reading a story, and if you want to, just tapping on the paragraph, and suddenly it's being spoken out loud for you. Now, this is terrific. Either it just puts that character into your head, or if you're not very good at reading, you're somehow learning. Instead of having to go to a different machine and Google something, it's all there, it's waiting for you. Everything you want to know about the story, how they sound, who they are, where they're going, what it's like, what it means, is all wrapped up in it. It's actually magic.
Thank you. That's what she looks like.
Isn't that fantastic? So we are so happy to be shareholders and partners and advisors and confidants to our friends at Orson. Thank you for that. We have 5 minutes for questions with them before we bring the rest of the panelists for backing of artists on stage. Does anybody have any questions for Richard or Benjamin? I loved what you guys said there again about publishing needs a new digital standard. Big time. And provoking the senses that you want. I think that's what it's all about. So we have a question over there. Can somebody get a microphone to our friend? And if you could say who you are, please, really quickly.
My name is Thomas Lelyveld. Good morning.
Hello.
How do you differentiate this this solution with the EPUB-free interactive solution that is kind of standardized, though very slowly being adopted by the publishers?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, one thing that Richard didn't mention is that we actually have 5 different kind of sales channels that is not being devised for EPUB. The sort of technical specifics of EPUB I can't go into huge detail about now, but we have, normally you can buy an EPUB file through Kindle or in iBooks, and that's just one sales channel. That's our first one. We're going to have a second one where you can buy in real-world stores, in independent booksellers, where people go who love books to be sold books by people who are there to sell books, and also in gift shops. And then we're also going to be marketing to the library chains, which is there's a huge business to be had in selling digital books to libraries, and also in co-production deals. So we've done a number of deals where publishers pay us to make their work, and then we also get some revenue from that.
And I think that the reason that they pay us, and it's your point about slow adoption of the EPUB format, is simply looms are better designed. EPUB lacks the ability to really create distinctive experiences.
EPUB 3, right?
Yeah, EPUB 3. And I think that publishers feel that.
Yeah, and also the unique syncing of the audiobook, the entire audiobook with the text at the paragraph level is something only we're doing.
I just had wondering, taking that point.
He's clearly the interesting questioner in the room. I'm looking forward to this. Go ahead.
Well, now I'm going to disappoint you. I was just thinking, for me, I read a lot more nonfiction than I do fiction. And I was wondering what plans there were there, particularly going to universities. I can think of people to make a much more interactive experience in a digital world for learning online.
Absolutely.
If you have plans to go there as well.
Totally agree. We're going to do next year a big college reading list. You know, what's interesting about our model is that we break even at between 500 and 1,500 downloads. After that, it's pure profit. And the college market is huge. I did English at Oxford. If there had been an edition of a book where I could read it, make notes when I wanted to, and then when I wanted to clean my room, just have it read itself to me, and then step back into that, I would have absolutely loved it. And our bet, people who love real books, so do I. Our bet is that people who read ebooks will choose looms over them.
Yeah, and there's obviously a range of nonfiction titles, and some are going to be more adaptable to this format or not. But I mean, I read a lot of biographies and histories, and I'm endlessly just like Googling things on my phone, and it drives me crazy. You know, so to be able to see the image and pull down and have that all in one package, as Joanna Lumley.
You know, it's one of those things where people are researching, they want to listen, if they see music, they go to YouTube and get it. What we're trying to do is make it all into one seamless experience. A bit like Apple did for purchasing digital music. Yeah, at the back. Oh no, sorry, not at the back. Oh yes.
Yeah, that's rather loud. Really interested in looking at from the technology point of view, it seems clearly superior, but from a commercial point of view, you kind of remind me a little bit of Netscape in that you're coming up with a technologically brilliant solution, but one that isn't necessarily commercially controllable. And it's not inconceivable that EPUB 4, for example, or 5 or 6 or whatever, could incorporate some of the USPs that you currently hold in your brand. And at the same time, because you're trying to control the distribution channel, there's a risk that people might sort of kick back against the potential for future commercial control and monopoly dominance that you might have. And I'm just interested to know how you take something which is clearly a superior product and actually turn it into a long-term commercial solid play.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I'd say I think that they're going to end up being more than one players. It's a huge market. There's everything to go. I don't think that that will necessarily be a bad thing. There are so many wonderful books that if EPUB 4 ends up publishing some of them, we're okay with that. Where I think Orson has a lead is that unlike other coding firms who care about tech, we care about art and tech. In fact, we're having a meeting with a guy on the board of Apple, and he said to us that no one's thinking about art and tech like you. So it's the curation of the titles. Certainly in the early days, up to about 500 titles, we'll choose very carefully what books we do, which great stars we get to read them, who the musicians are. And in terms of the route to market, you know, Apple gave us a world tour of their stores. They've been hugely supportive. We're obviously built for Android in the next generation. There are many routes in to purchase looms, but what I see readers want, digital readers, is a store where they can go and they know that the biographies are the best ones, that the historical fiction is the best, that it's the most interesting non-fiction out there. What independent stores like Foyles do so well. You can't get anything at Foyles. You can't get everything at John Lewis. You get a selection of the best stuff. And weirdly, no one else has done that. So you're right, they might copy it, there might be kickback, but I think we're going to be in it first.